Good morning, everyone. I am Ehsan Sheikh Al-Haram at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm pleased to be with you today with a fascinating panel. As you may know, this academic year, we have several panels focusing on Iranian diasporic authors, their struggles, accomplishments, and ways that they negotiate their diasporic position while writing in their respective host nations. This virtual lecture series is dedicated to exploring how Iranian diaspora authors reflect on the community's attempts to carving out forms of belonging to their host nations. Authors and discussants address specific modes of power and representations that Iranian diaspora community has developed to rehabilitate their position as members of a minoritized population with ambivalent feelings of belonging. Our moderator today is Dr. Mehrak Kamali, who is a Persianate studying modern Persian literature and modern history of Iran. He is teaching and studying Middle Eastern cinema, modern Persian literature, Iranian politics, and Persian language pedagogy at the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Cultures at the Ohio State University. Some of Dr. Kamali's publications include Polyphony and Ambiguity in Shahriar Mandanipour's The Courage of Love in Rotlek Handbook of Persian Literature, upcoming 2022, The Integration of Modernist Persian Literature and Fictional Uncertainty in Shahriar Mandanipour's Short Stories in the Journal of International Journal of Persian Literature, upcoming summer 2023, Fluid Point of View and the Representation of Powerless in the 1980s Persian Fiction, in the Handbook of Persian Literary Devices, upcoming Springer 2023. As a translator, he has translated the book Politics of Writing in Iran, A History of Modern Persian Literature by Kamran Talattouf into Persian, which has been published in Iran by Namak publisher in 2016. As an author, he has published a book entitled Sociological Essays about Today's Persian Fiction in Persian in 2020. Please feel free to use Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to post your questions. Dr. Kamali will address as many questions as possible. Before handing it over to Dr. Kamali, I would like to thank UNC Persian Studies, the Department of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies, and the Center for Middle East and Islamic Studies, and ICS NC that have co-sponsored and made this event possible. Dr. Kamali, the virtual floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and I am very glad to be with you today in the panel about Shahriar Mandanipour's work. And Shahriar Mandanipour is, he should be here. I think he will be here very soon. And he is one of the prominent Iranian fiction writers, novelists, and he has a long term, maybe about 40 years, working as an author in Iran and outside of Iran. It's for 15 years here outside of Iran and 25 years before that in Iran. And I will talk about him, and I want to share share my PowerPoint about him, about today's work. It is mostly we will talk about his important novel, Censoring an Iranian Love Story, that it is mostly about the diasporic literature, diasporic author that he is here. Actually, my familiarity with Shahriar is returns to maybe more than 30 years ago when we were in Shiraz and I was a young boy interested in literature, Persian fiction, modern Persian fiction. And at that time and after that, we were in the same group, the same meeting that it was in Shiraz. And we worked on our writings. And he was at that time and after that, he was one of the very excellent writers in Iran. He is here. He was born in 1956, and right now he's an exiled Iranian modernist fiction writer, literary theorist, critic, journalist, and the other things. Right now, he moderates a website named Bang, that it is about the Persian literature, mostly about the Persian literature. Oh, Shahriar is here. Hi, Shahriar. Yes, I want to talk about a little. It is the 3 books in English. That is the first one. It is this one. Is the cover of Censoring an Iranian Love Story, and this one is Moonbrow, and this one is that it is released 4 days ago. Seasons of Purgatory, that it is Shahriar's short stories in English. And
Mehrak, I would like to say that the portrait or the image at the left side, it's not the image of the book. It is about an essay in New Yorker about the censoring an Iranian love story. And the work and the image is from Shirin Neshat. It's different. It's different from the cover of the book.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, my fault. Sorry. Sorry.
No, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful.
No, it's good. I saw that there is no name, no title on the poster, and I said, oh, well, what's that? What? Yes. Yeah. Mandanipour, actually, Shahriar has written Censoring an Iranian Love Story, mostly for Western audience, as also for next generation of Iranians. He will talk about it more. That he, in his mind, are 2 audiences: Westerners and also the next generation of Iranians. That they should know about what happened to their authors in Iran regarding censorship, and the pressure on them for writing. And he wrote it when he was at Brown University, and he compares Shahriar compares that the process of writing when he were in Iran and he was in Iran and he was here. It was a personal interview with him, and he told me that the 2 novels, The Courage of Love, Dil Dildadegi in Persian, The Courage of Love, the process of writing of that one, and the process of writing of this one, the Censoring an Iranian Love Story, he talks about it. He says that I was working on Dil Dildadegi, or The Courage of Love, for more than 8 years. I revised it 3-4 times and changed it a lot because I wanted the author be absent from the novel. I wrote Censoring in less than 1 year because its narrator was my alter ego. And I didn't have any trouble for making the narrator. Because of the novel's form and its audience, Westerners and next generation, the narrator of Censoring should talk directly and escape from complexities. In the process of writing Censoring, I was under the influence of American atmosphere and America's atmosphere and American literature that encouraged the writer-narrator to talk clear. See that it is the process of an exiled author who wants to write for the other audiences, not the audiences that mostly they knew what is the context or behind the text or something like that. It was the difficulty for Shahriar, and he overcome from that. And the defeat of the 1979 revolution made Iranians authors, and I'm talking about that what happened to Iranians at that time, and intellectuals to look at themselves for understanding what happened to them. The first 2 decades of this 20th century, many Iranians began to frankly and straightforwardly their memoirs in other languages, such as English, French, German, as if writing in languages other than Persian freed them from the dominant power of censorship and allowed them to be honest about their personal experiences and desires. Persian fiction writers began to doubt their understanding of reality and tried to see, analyze, and present everything from an uncertain perspective in other languages. One of them was Shahriar Mandanipour's Censoring an Iranian Love Story, because the writer, the alter ego of Mandanipour, is represented as one of the characters and played the role of its author narrator as both the subject and object of narration. Mandanipour's imagination applied in Censorship takes its characters to journey through post-revolutionary Iran's social, historical, and cultural circumstances in order to show them to the Western audience and also the next generation that they don't know what was the context of that. In the very first pages of the novel, Mandanipour turns to the Western audience and exposes his motive for this narration. Why did he write this novel? Explaining the bitterness of his earlier works in Persian. Shahriar's earlier works in Persian, the other works in Persian was so bitter, and it's sometimes we call him as the Edgar Allan Poe, Iranian Edgar Allan Poe, and it is like that, they are very suffering on that. And Mandanipour describes his difficult situation as an Iranian author and shows his desire to change his mind and his writing style. And it is the quote here: "I am an Iranian writer to writing dark and bitter stories populated by ghosts and dead narrators with predictable endings of death and destruction. I am a writer who at the threshold of 50 has understood that the purportedly real world around us has enough death and destruction and sorrow, and that I did not have to have the right to add even more defeat and hopelessness to it with my stories." He wants to write something in satire, though not about this, not about the sufferings. With censoring, Mandanipour changes his mind and his writing style. For these reasons, it is the quote of Mandanipour: "I with all my being want to write a love story, a story with an ending that is a gateway to light." Here is the challenge of Mandanipour. Shahriar wants to write a novel in Persian for Persian audience about love. Here, he is talking about the process of writing of that novel for Western audience. Readers may think this should not be difficult, but Mandanipour wants to publish his love story in his homeland. And unlike in many, this is a quote from Mandanipour, unlike in many countries around the world, writing and publishing a love story in my beloved Iran are not easy tasks. Inspired by the ideas of Joanna Irwin's Zakirka about collective memory, I argue that because the Islamic government's official understanding of love runs counter to most Iranians' understanding of it, talking and writing about love becomes a relying point in the struggle for freedom. Shahriar could only write this kind of fiction after coming to the United States. He cannot do it in Iran. He couldn't do it in Iran. He came to the US in 2006 as an international writers per project fellow at Brown University and became an exile after publishing Censorship. Censorship is a distinctive break from his previous works, in which he narrates mostly based on defamiliarizing familiar concepts and avoids using his own experiences. I'm talking about his writings in Persian as materials for his fictions. In other words, Censorship is mostly derived from his life experience as a writer in Iran under a totalitarian regime, something he had never directly written about before. Two parallel transitions. First, in his personal condition from a man living in his country to an exile, and second, in his writing style from an impersonal narration to autobiography, show an incomparable fictional experience embedded in Censorship. And next one. As we know that it is, I'm talking about the James Wood's work, the critic on his censoring, and before that I want to talk about it a little bit what I find this one. Mandanipour grew up in Iran with the Persian language and his as his mother tongue. He has focused on the Persian language as one of the elements of his fictional imagination. Entering the US, he faced both threats and opportunities. One of the threats was his disconnection from the Persian language and subsequent loss of his language abilities. In contrast, living in the United States gave him an opportunity to transfer from Persian, a language not only full of metaphors and complexities, but also occupied by fears and suspicions, to American language in which Mandanipour could talk directly about his feelings, interests, and personal preoccupation. This solution was a kind of collaborative translation that attracted the critics and raised the question of how the mechanism of fictional creativity operated within it. I'm talking about the collaboration, the collaborative translation that Shahriar and Miss Sarah Khalili they did for the both novels, Moonbrow and Censorship. It's the process that they work together to make a text in English that it is easy to read and good for American audiences. Here, James Wood refers to the contradiction between the Iranian nature of the text as well as the novel's themes, which Iranian writers cannot talk about, which Iranian writer, Mandanipour cannot talk about, and English, the language into which it is translated. James Wood says his book is thus actually displaced. It had to have been written with an audience outside of Iran in mind, but in a language that this audience would mostly not understand. It is the challenge of an exiled author, thinking, writing in his modern time, and also thinking about the audience here. Mari Absti, the other critic, also talked about this contradiction and discusses the embedded role of the narrator, the author, and the audience of the novel with regard to their voices and languages. On the most basic level, the words of the novel in English are dictated not just by the Mandanipour, but also by Khalili as translator. Subversively and self-consciously, Mandanipour dislocates his own voice from that of his narrator and his own language from that of his audience, disturbing the political agendas and appropriations typically available to the memorist's transparent self and testimony. I will ask Shahriar to talk more about this collaborative translation with Sarah, with Ms. Khalili in his talk after me. This embedded dislocation is one of the most important constituent elements of uncertainty, or constituent elements in censoring, that who are the subjects of the narration in the novel? Who is or are the main characters to whom we should look? And more important, why should we consider them? It is the questions that we have when we read censoring. And the main characters here also, we can talk about the Mandanipour as the actual historical author, that I'll call him Mandanipour, the alter ego of Mandanipour, that it is the other kind of implied author in the novel, that I call it Shahriar. Mr. Petrovich, the censor that is so important in the novel, and Dora and Sarah, the two lovers that they are here. In censoring, Shahriar offers the Western audience a dark, satiric explanation of a totalitarian situation in a way similar to that of Franz Kafka, George Orwell, and Milan Kundera. They and Mandanipour show us the hidden irony in the situation, as well as the words and actions of the totalitarian government's agents. It is not an accident that most novels about an authoritarian situation are full of the satire and irony. These authors want to illustrate the stupidity of a stern and harsh government that remained us the importance of laughter. Laughter as a weapon against a ruling group that it is inherently stupid, and because of its stupidity is fearful of intelligent people. Through these characters and their contradiction, Shahriar makes a satire, makes a humor as it is rare in his works. By beginning involved the Islamic government, Mandanipour is obliged to work against his novel's integrity and split censoring into three parts. Censoring contains three texts in one: the novel accepted by the censor in bold font, the commentary of the novel in regular font, and crossed out sentences and phrases. By crossed out parts, the reader can see what he is rejecting. The censor, Mr. Petrovich, rejecting actually. Sometimes in defense to the censor, and sometimes because they don't fit the growing love relationship. It is the quote from Kürk's review about the novel. Protecting the dominant religious morality requires a strong system of censorship, which is not only applied to publishing, but to every individual activities. Censoring shows the Western reader different aspects of this systematic governing of Iranians' actions and words, beginning by describing the function of censorship in publishing, where it goes beyond the religious issues and becomes a tool for controlling the process of thinking and writing. In theory, the focus of censorship is on words and phrases, but in practice, it targets the personalities of the people in order to prepare them to accept the totalitarian regime. It is a quote from the book, the censoring, that you can read it. I don't want to read it because of the time. But the ultimate goal is that all restrictions should be gradually internalized by authors and readers, so that they think, write, and even act in the manner that the system dictates to them. Censoring's plot casts the futile resistance to the protagonists and Shahriar in his two fictional positions, the real and alter ego of Mandanipour, against the censor dictatorial practice. The narrative strategy of censoring is for representing this complex situation is based on the dividing the subject of narration into two parts: the actual historical author and his alter ego. Mandanipour, the actual author, puts his life inside the story of the novel and talks freely about his feelings and actions. It gives the novel an autobiographical element. Shahriar, the alter ego, clarifies the latent psychological and cultural complexities in every single fictional event, yet threatened and attempts to subvert of the official morality and its authority and threatened consequences. He puts love at the center of his narrative to represent the repressive nature of the Islamic government in Iran, but his share of the narration is not limited to this. Mandanipour defines two audiences for his story: Westerners and Iran's next generation. Writing for American audiences gives him the self-confidence to talk openly, clearly, directly about his feelings. Regarding Iran's next generation, Mandanipour, whose emphasis on pure literature has been recognized among literary circles in Iran, has changed his mind and talks about the necessity of recording the events that official history does not wish recorded, because it is quote from Mandanipour. Censorship has taken root in Iran. He believes that without his writing about Iranians' struggle and engagement with censorship, this part of Iran's history will be overlooked. In his narrative strategy, part of this story is narrated by Mandanipour and the other part by his alter ego. I want to say that it was impossible to do that in Iran or in Persian language. It is just can happen in exile here. All these complicated relationships show the reader how Dara is captured by the text and how Mandanipour and Shahriar are captured by the censoring and controlling system and its agent, Mr. Petrovich. When Dara rebels against Shahriar's control, he shouted at him, "Dara, go home. You are reigning everything. I am a censored writer. I can easily delete you from my novel if I choose." Both Dara and Shahriar engage in a crisis which is based on their incapacity to create their own lives and write their own stories. Everything is like a humorous nightmare, and that has no end. Only love helps Dara to challenge the limitation imposed to his life. Seeing Sarah faces him to confront a love that it is structured according to a romantic triangle to desire rivalry. It is from a quote from the Makhal. The rivalry between Dara, Petrovich, and Sinbad, which developed mostly against Shahriar's intentions, simultaneously makes them subjects and objects of becoming in the novel. And at the end, I want to, that is the this complexity also it's the censoring Sarah and Dara's love from the novel by Mr. Petrovich makes that very complicated. And in the presence of Sarah that convinced Dara to make a strong effort to escape from the destiny imposed on him by the author. It is the very dialectical relationship between alter ego of the author, Dara, Sarah, and Mr. Petrovich. But just I want to finish my talk with a quote from the novel, which makes clear how Mandanipour's preoccupation of being an unusual writer. He doesn't want to go for cliches or to go for stereotypes or something like that, as you see in this quote from the novel from Censorship. Exile gives Mandanipour an opportunity to contain a distinct element of uncertainty, where the writer likes to have the readers create some of the story for themselves in Censorship. He boldly stresses on the characters becoming to force the reader to accept them as the entities separated from the writer or narrator. The roles of Dara and the interrogator, Mr. Petrovich, change through the story, and they rebel against the authority of the narrator. Censoring an Iranian love story contains a plot in which main characters fight the writer for control their destinies and lives. I argue that it happens just in exile for Shahriar and for the writer, and making it in this situation. I know that Shahriar wants to return to his writing style in Persian in Moonbrow and maybe pass his shift to humor and something in censorship, but I want to say that it just happened when he came here and be in the academic or writing, the creative writing atmosphere of the United States. Thank you so much, and I close my mic and ask Ehsan to continue. Maybe Shahriar, you can start to talk.
Okay. First of all, I would like to say hello to you, my friend, Mr. Kamali, and Ms. Claudia Yahubi, and other fellows at Asian Studies of UNC. And you present a perfect review of my works, and actually you told or said the most part of my presentation, and because of it, I just read a short part of it, particularly because of the shortage of time as well. So, by all means, let me start with an allegory. An allegory about on the life of a writer like me, a writer of diaspora literature, or a writer in exile. It is one of the stories of Zen. Once upon a time, there was a man at the side of the river, and he was looking to go to the other side of the river. And he couldn't find any bridge. At the end of the day, he could see somebody on the other side of the river. He cried, "Hey, buddy, how can I get to the other side of the bridge?" other side of the river. That man look at him and look around, and after a few minutes, he said, but you are already on the other side of the river. This is the story about somebody like mine. Apparently, I came from such a country like Iran. I escaped from censorship or assassination or everything like that to United States. But it's not the other side of the river for me, because I am living with my nightmares and the scares that I brought with myself from my motherland country. Somehow physically, I am living in United States, but my mind is in Iran, suffering people and dark future, corruption of language, censorship, and the things that you know better than me. Anyway, I'm not regretful from the years that I was in Iran. I was living in Iran. Iran gifted me my literary prose in the Persian language. It is the only precious that I have. I believe that every writer prose would make his lifestyle and the way that he understands and realizes this surreal world. In my writing, I have a rule which I named it 3-4 seconds rule. About 14 months of my military service, I have served at the front line of the Iran-Iraq absurd war. I forced myself to write the stories in the bunker. Bunker, it is a sort of collective stronghold. We had just a small lighter. It works with petrol, and under the light of it, I write stories and my memoir there. When I was writing, I could hear the Iraqi shell being discharged. It took 3 or 4 seconds for a 120 millimeter mortar shell to reach our line. If it landed on a trench, everyone inside would turn into chopped meat. When I was writing, and when I was hearing the firing of that mortar shell, I had just 3 or 4 seconds to add one word to my story. One word in the distance between life and death. One word that could be my last and the best word on a piece of, my best word on a piece of a paper of my life. In those few seconds, I grasped the weight and the value of the words. I felt the heart beating of the words with my heart beating. It has been established in my mind as it has come with me in all past years of my writing. The rule of 3-4 second writing. it doesn't mean, I don't mean that writing as fast as you can. I mean that you value the word as something that one of them could be your last word in this world, in your life. So because of it, there are times that when I'm writing a story, my mind is working in a way that I have just 3 seconds to write, to add another word to my story. And my mind works so hard to find the best word. I review all the words that I know on that matter, for instance, to choose the best one. But on the other hand, it takes time for me. When I review my story, when I try to make a better image, it takes about 1 month that I finish a story. Let's get back to the diaspora literature. I think it is essentially against corruption and decadence of the literature. And it is anti-national forgetfulness. We know that decadence of language and forgetfulness are what that any dictator tries to impose to the country, to the people, like a pandemic. We know that the language, they need to corrupt language to use it because of the lies. Corruption of the language, particularly, is a sort of killer of literature. And this is what diaspora literature is doing against that. The diaspora literature is trying to keep alive the pure language of the country, each country that they are under the rule of a dictatorship. And in short, I have a dream, like that great man. I have a dream. In this new dark age of the world, that the iron walls are growing and getting taller on the borders, I have a dream. I believe there is a republic of literature, like a dreamland. For living in this region, you don't need to have a birth certificate, visa, green card, ticket, bank account, or credit. What you do need is just having artistic stories. For entering into this utopia, you do need pure, beautiful stories. That's it. So just please pen it, Republic of Literature. There would be a time that every writer could say, when somebody asks him, where are you from? He could say, I'm from the Republic of Literature. The freedom of literature. I have many notes, prepared many notes for our program, but because of the shortage time, I prefer that we switch to question and answering part, that it is the most exciting part of such a programs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shahriar. Thank you so much. I want to have a conversation with you maybe for 10 minutes, and after that we will go to the audiences and ask them for question and answer. That this is the challenge of the writers, especially the Iranian or Middle Eastern, I don't know, writers, is that when we are talking, you have a novel or short story, almost all of the audiences, they wanted to use that as a text to understand what happened there. It means that if a French writer write a novel or short story, no one says that it is about the social conditions and cultural things in France. But if an Iranian writer like you writes something, they use it, they say that, oh, it shows us something about the government. It shows us something about the culture. It shows us something about, it means that when you are talking about the Republic of Literature, how you can think about that you will be, for example, I'm asking you that your new novel, Moonbrow, it has a lot of things about Iran, but also it has something that it is universal. And maybe you want to stress or focus on that, or ask the others to, oh, see that I have a universal attitude, that it is for all of the human beings around the world. It is not just about Iran. It is, I think it's a challenge, it's a struggle for the Middle Eastern or Iranian or the something from the third world writers, that they should prove themselves that we are talking about universal aspects of the life. Do you have any idea about that or want to talk about it?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable that the reader judge me, or as you said, they think that they can find something about Iranian political situation in my books, you know. Although the subject of my novels are about Iran, some political matters, some cultural matters, the social matters, but I'm not agree with it. I'm not agree with writing a sort of commitment literature, engagement literature. I don't like to write a sort of socialist realism literature, you know, the committed literature. No, I believe that the art of literature, I believe in the art of literature and the literariness of the prose, of the text. Of course, when I am writing a novel, my characters are living in Iran. There are some aspects, there are some images of social life or suppression in my country, in my novel. But they are not my literature. They are just only maybe the first layer of the novel. What I'm trying to write is making literature from that disaster, making literature from the lack of love, the forbidden of love. This is what I'm trying to write. And to find out a sort of elegant, a sort of pure language to write it. The art of writing, you know, this is what I'm looking for. Not to report about, for instance, a social matter or a social situation in Iran or a political situation in Iran. I don't like that I don't like that somebody called me a writer in exile. You know, it's sad that it has a sort of pity on it. No, if my literature has something to for the world, okay, accept it, but not as put me in a share of that exiled literature. Diaspora is something else. Yeah, because I am writing in Farsi or Persian, and it is a sort of diaspora literature. And writing in Farsi, particularly in Iran, because of censorship and because of tyranny, it is a sort of diaspora literature. I agree with it, but I don't like that somebody asked me as an exile writer, how do you write? No, as a writer, as a writer, I'm starting to write a novel. But I can't help it that the subject or the focus of my novel is to Iran. That's the one point. And yeah, they start, for instance, although censoring the Iranian love story, Moonbrow, and even most of the story of my last collection of short stories, The Season of Purgatory, that is published a few days ago, they are happening in Iran. The setting is in Iran. But in my new novel, at last I started to write a novel, something, a sort of a struggle between Iranian soldiers, American soldiers at the front line. So I tried to write American characters, bring American protagonists and antagonists in my novel. And it is a new experience for me as well, to have a Western character in my novel. And the next question.
Yes, yes, thank you so much. I want to ask you a question that I think it's important that about what James Wood says that about the dislocating or dislocated text.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, about you're working together with Sarah Khalili for making it English, for translating it to English. I want to ask you to talk about it, that the process and what is I see something correct in James Wood's comment about that. What do you think about that? It is you are thinking in Persian, writing in Persian, but your audience is here and you should translate it and you should work with someone to do it. Can you talk about it a little bit?
It is, and somehow it's not. Of course, I dare not to write literature in English. It's too late for me. And as I said, my precious is my prose in Persian. And I can't leave it behind. So I have to write in Persian. But my audiences could be in Iran or could be outside of Iran because of translation. There are many novels and short stories that they are writing in other languages and they translate it to English or French or German. No difference between them. Dislocating is true. Yeah, I have to migrate from Iran to United States, and of course I could find a good opportunity to write and publish my books. It's right, but as I said, always my mind is thinking about Iran. And it's hard for me to get rid of the nightmares that I had from Iran. So I have no clear answer to this question. What I know is that I still can write. And I'm using this situation in the United States as much as I can. I mean, writing in a sort of freedom, writing without the escape or a nightmare that I had in Iran, that every night I was expected that the secret police stormed to my house and they got my notes and my computer, and I lost my novel, for instance, 300 pages of a novel. In the United States, I don't have such a nightmare, so I don't scare of it. So I can write better. And also they are the sadness of diaspora, being in diaspora situation, you have it, homesick and everything like it, that I use them in my stories as a subject of my stories. And I would like to talk about my work with Sarah. In 2006, when I came to United States, we had a invitation from Penn of New York. We were four Iranian writers. The youngest one was me. And one of my friends told me that there is a translator that he translated one of my stories very well. Try to find her. And I found out that her name is Sarah Khalili, and she translated one of my complicated stories named Shatter the Stone Too. So I called her, and it was the beginning of a process of a hard and long working together. I write a sort of short story that it was like a draft of Censoring an Iranian Love Story. Sarah translated it. And I found out that the American audience are welcome to this text, to this story, to this short story. They are laughing at its jokes and dark humor as well. So I started to write Censoring an Iranian Love Story as a novel. And I called Sarah if she would like to translate it, and she said yes. And then a sort of Sarah's miracle was happened. On that time, Sarah was a good reader of world literature. She was in the Western countries since she was 8 years old. So she's so perfect English language, French as well. And in Farsi part, it was my job to make her familiar to my good or complicated prose or my bad prose somehow, not familiar prose. It was a hard job for me. And in the process of translating Censorship, it happens. There were times that for hours, we were talking about just one word. She suggested me a few words, and I have to find out about that English words. My English was worse than these days at that time. So I have to make a research here and there, an encyclopedia, texts, and it takes time. But on the other hand, the other process was going well. We couldn't understand our language better and better and better. And Sarah could understand my prose better and better. So it works in Censoring an Iranian Love Story. And she did a great job in that translation. Then Mumbero as well, and that it was a hardest job that she did. You know, in Mumbero, there is a sort of elegant prose, and there is a street language prose as well. Two different prose she could manage in translation and translating into in a good English. I owe her so much.
Thank you, Shahriar. Yeah, thank you for this good conversation. I want to go to the question and answers with the audiences. That the first question is from Jane. That he asked you, she asked you, Mr. Mandanipour, your control of time in your works is masterful. It also seems inseparable from other elements of your works. But I am interested in time's relationship to narration. Can you please talk about the role of that control or manipulation of time plays in the creation of your narrators? Thank you.
In my workshop, I distinguish 4 kinds of time in a story writing. The chronicle time, the space-time, universal time, that it starts with Big Bang. And at the last, I defined a sort of time that I call it a storytelling time. The time that it happens in the story. It's not just like the time, the chronicle time that we are familiar with it. And the writer should manage it and use it as much as he can. For instance, there are times that there are times that, for instance, that when you are going to write in an important scene, the falling of a glass to the ground, it takes about a few seconds, 2 seconds maybe. But you can write it as it falls in a slow motion, so slow. How? Using long sentences, using the words that they, using the verbs that they don't have any action or motion in them, and long sentences, using more and more pronouns and something like that, and make it long, a long phrase, a long paragraph of an event that it happens in 2 seconds. So you can make a sort of a slow motion with it. And on the contrary, you can make a slow event, a slow motion event, happens so fast. You can use the verbs that they have motion in it. They have a sort of acceleration in them, the speed in them, and with short story, with short sentences. Then the reader feel that everything is running so fast. There are some techniques that we can use and play with time, a story time, not the chronicle time or historical time or like that. A story time, that it is, according to Bergson, I think, it is like a stream. It goes fast and it goes slow. There are times that 1 second of it passes for us. I feel, you feel that it passed for 1 minute. And there are times that 1 minute, the feeling of 1 minute passes just as 1 second. A sort of emotional time, working in a storytelling time. Yeah.
Thank you, Shahriar. And the second question is from Kim. He says, or she says that, good morning. It means that it was before 12. Good morning. What is your greatest passion or muse in writing and creating literature?
Oh, it is a hard question. I suggest that to everybody in my talking and reading, I suggest don't ask such a question from writers. Don't ask them whose writer has influence in him or her. They will tell you the lie. They will lie you. They will give you the stories. I don't know my passion. I know if I can't write, I will get sick. If in a few weeks I didn't write anything, I feel so bad. I will be nervous. I will be a bitter man, and anxiety and something like that. It's my life. It is the pleasure, a sort of pleasure in my life. I feel that when I write a story, when I feel that it is an okay story, I feel that I am alive. I could create something that it wasn't exist before, and somehow it is a job as well. But the beauty of creation, maybe. And at the end of the day, I am a shepherd. I like to say lies. I like to cry wolf, wolf when there wouldn't any wolf chasing me. I mentioned the Nabokov phrase that the best writer in the world was the boy that who cried wolf, wolf. Chupane Durugu, the shepherd that lying that the wolf is coming to attack the sheep, and Nabokov tells that he was a great storytelling because the people believed him very well. So yeah, I am writing stories because I am a kind of that shepherd who would like to cry wolf, wolf when there isn't any wolf. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We have 4 more questions. I don't know, Ehsan, do we have time to go over all of them? 4 more questions. I will start with the first one from Samira. That Shahriar, please talk maybe short about answer the questions that we have time to work on all of them. Maybe a little shorter. Thank you. When did you know you were going to be successful author? Samira asks.
After years of writing that I didn't show my stories to anybody, and I didn't tell anybody that I'm going to, I would like to be a writer. In 3043, I wrote a story that I didn't publish it anywhere. And I felt that it is a story. It is a professional story. I don't mean that it's good or bad, but I felt that it's a professional story. Then I start to took my stories to the others. I took one of my stories, I sent one of my stories to Hushain Gulshiri, Iranian great story, Iranian great author. And then I started to publish my books. It was about maybe 40, 45 years ago, after writing many, many stories. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to the other one. Nagar asks, I view exile not as a geographical or political concept, but as excess in the self, the anonymity of the excess that cannot be embodied. You were exiled even in Iran. It's like a comment. If you want to talk about it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yes. And that's it.
That's it. Yeah, it's right.
Yeah. Omid says that Omid Falawazad, a unique quality of Mr. Mandanipour's stories in Farsi is the way his prose creates an immersive experience for the reader. Technically, the prose and the narration pulls you in and you stay engaged not only with the plot or the characters, but setting and even the form demands your full attention, and the satisfaction that comes from that immersive experience is what makes you to want to his prose over and over, to read his prose over and over. It's again one comment.
Yeah, it's a comment, a beautiful comment. Thank you.
Yes, it is more, yeah, it says that it is more than just about the narration, it's about your prose and the beautifulness of the writing and using language.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Parvane Hosseini asked about the Salam, Mr. Mandanipour. My question is about memory. How does memory, or probably lack of memory, sometimes in exile, help or interfere in your writing about a place that you are far from?
Yeah, it is so.
Place that you are far from. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a good question, and the answer could be the matter is so complicated. The memory of an exiled person. I just shortly I can say, for instance, since I came here to United States, some of my lovely families passed away. I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel that my lovely aunt has passed away because I didn't see it. I could see her as the last picture that I have from her in my mind. Or even the people that they are alive. I know that they are getting old. But in my mind, the last picture of them is living in, for instance, 16 years ago, the time that I met them in Iran. It's so complicated. There are times that suddenly a wave of memories attack you. You don't want it. You want it, for instance, to have thinking about maybe sweet things, sweet memories. But suddenly you face a tsunami of memories that you try to forget, or you didn't even know that you remember them. So it is so complicated. It is a struggle. And the best way to deal with it, I think, is to write it. Give it to a character, not in a memoir. Give it to a character of a story. Thank you so much.
And yeah, thank you. And it is the last question from Ashigan. what is some advice you have for young writers?
No, there is no writer. There is no advice to a writer. Do what you want, although you have to read good books as much as you can, and you have to write as much as you can. There are the tasks of a writer, but there is no advice to a writer. Go on your way and find your way and walk on your way. That's it. Bravely.
Thank you so much, Shahriar, and thank you for all of you that being this panel today. I want to ask Ehsan to finish the panel.
Sure. Thank you so much. This was truly inspiring and such a rich conversation. I want to thank you again, and also thank Professor Yaghoubi for organizing this. Thank you everyone for being here. And please, just a reminder that we have Hadi, the publisher, Hadi Khonjinian, on March 12th presenting. So please join us for that event as well. Thank you everyone again.